Hello, everyone. Just wanted to go over our short answer questions from the midterm. Most people did fairly well on the written portion of the test, but just want to go over these with you in case you want some insight into what I'm thinking when I approach these questions or what kind of answers we're looking for. So you would have gotten some of these questions, not all of these questions, and everyone would have gotten them in different order, but I'm going to go through all of them anyways, just in the order that I wrote them. So one of the first questions is a question about hypothesis testing and hindsight understanding, basically asking you which one is better and why. And so if you remember back in chapter 1, I believe, 1 or 2, we had talked about hindsight understanding as that idea of after you've seen a behavior, you would propose an explanation that would make sense in context. So you see somebody act a certain way, and you sit down afterwards and you try and figure out why they acted that way. So hindsight understanding is you just making some proposals or potential ideas about what could have happened. Hypothesis testing is the scientific method. That's where you're going to test possible explanations by actually seeing what of your possible explanations might actually explain that behavior. So you would set up a couple of hypotheses where you would say, if the behavior was due to this particular thing, then when we expose people to this particular thing, we should see X behavior. And so from that description, hypothesis testing is going to be a much more reliable form of testing because it's going to allow us to figure out what was going on. If we can set up experiments, we can get at causality. We can for sure know what was the cause of different changes in behavior. And even if we can't get into experimental setups, we could still do something like a correlational study or even observational studies that at least help us understand a little bit more of what's going on, even if we can't get at causation. So from all of this, your take-home should be that hypothesis testing is the better of the two versions because it allows us to actually understand what's going on. Whereas hindsight understanding is that we propose potential solutions after the fact, but have no way of testing it. The next question was asking which of the 6 perspectives most fit with your view of behavior. And this one was very open-ended. Basically, if you had listed one of these 6 perspectives that we talked about, the psychodynamic, behavioral, humanistic, cognitive, sociocultural, or biological, and you had given some kind of explanation as to why the views of that particular perspective fit with your own views, you would get the mark. So you could say that I most closely identify with the biological perspective because I'm most interested in, or I focus most on genes and evolution as factors driving behavior. That's as simple as it needed to be. The next question is, what is the importance of an operational definition? Now, this one was a little bit interesting to look at some of the responses because a lot of people gave a definition of operational definition. So they would tell us that it's going to define a variable in terms of whatever specific procedures or process you're going to measure it by. But the question was asking, why is it important? So this is one of those times where I want to draw your attention to the fact that you want to know what the question is asking. So it's not just what is an operational definition, it's why is it important to have one. And in our lectures, we talked about the fact that it's really important to have an operational definition because it tells other people how we conducted our study. What were we measuring and how? You can extend that to say that it would allow then other people to reproduce our study if they wanted to. Because now they know how we did it, they could then do it themselves. But mostly it's giving that information, that specific definition of what we did to other researchers or other people in the sciences. This next question is very similar to the question about the perspectives, where I asked which of the brain imaging techniques that we talked about did you find most interesting and why? So we talked about 8 different techniques, and you could talk about any aspect of those that you found to be very interesting. For example, during our lecture videos, I said that TMS, the transmagnetic stimulation, was my favorite because I think it's really cool that you can actually deactivate parts of people's brains to see what's going on and what's related to different behaviors. So if you could list any of these types of techniques and give an explanation as to what aspect of that technique was interesting, then you got the point. So basically this was pick one of the techniques and know what it does or know how it works, or be able to point to some aspect of it that would be really cool. So again, not too intensive. So our next question was asking about how our myelin sheath can affect transmission. And again, some people had just defined what the myelin sheath is, but the question is asking about what it does. So we can know that the myelin sheath is going to be a layer of insulation, but what we want to answer for this question is that your myelin sheath allows signals to travel faster. So our firing, our action potentials, will skip over areas that are covered by our myelin sheath and jump to the nodes of Ranvier. So it allows our signal to travel much faster on myelinated neurons than it would through unmyelinated neurons. So that is how the myelin sheath is affecting transmission, is it pushes the signals ahead. And then our last question is, what is the role of a glial cell? So you would just have to describe glial cells as cells that are going to support and surround neurons. You might have talked about the fact that they bring in nutrients and bring out wastes to help support those cells. Any of those points would get you the marks there.